Welcome to Making Money with Laura Sanders, a name you can trust. With over 20 years of real estate experience and selling over 150 homes a year, Laura Sanders is the #1 RE/MAX agent in the state of Florida for 2021. Join us each week as we discuss how to make money through buying and flipping homes to renting versus selling and everything in between. To join the conversation, call in live 888-994-4995, Studio A.
Hi, and welcome to Making Money with Laura Sanders, and I am your host, Laura Sanders. So every week we talk about something that can potentially make you money or save you money, and this week we're going to talk about emotional support animals and service animals. And we can't call them pets because they're pets. And so we have a really great lawyer that is going to be joining us tonight. His name is Richard Lubliner, and he specializes in condo law. So people, if you can't get a hold of Help Me Howard, you need to get a hold of Richard. It just might cost you a little more money. So anyway, welcome, Richard.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
So welcome. So I sell real estate, and a lot of times it comes up, I have a client, they have a pet. And they're like, well, I'm just going to go online and I'm going to certify the pet to become an emotional support animal. What do you think about that?
Well, first of all, there is no such thing as a certification for an emotional support animal. That's sort of a misunderstanding, and one of the things that has started this issue and why Florida enacted several years ago a law specific to emotional support animals because of the abuse that was going on. Like you're talking about the days of, it really started with airplane travel, the days of going online for $19.99 and getting a pass that says your dog's an ESA. So in an effort to crack down on that, Florida enacted a statute with respect to emotional support animals in an effort to prevent abuse. And I don't necessarily think it had the desired effect, but there is no such thing as a certification. If you're looking into purchasing or renting a house, all you have to do is to provide a doctor's note that says that you are required to have the animal for a specific purpose. And the association can't inquire what that purpose is, what specialized training the animal may or may not have. So it kind of puts up a barrier with respect to what the association can and can't do. If they don't handle it properly, the association can be sued under both Florida law and a federal law called the Fair Housing Act, which prevents discrimination in connection with housing. So it can have pretty disastrous consequences if it's not handled appropriately.
Okay, I think I hear your emotional support animal in the back.
No emotional support animals here.
Okay. So I guess what's the difference between emotional support and an emotional support and I forgot the other name.
Service animal.
Thank you, service animal. Oh my gosh.
Well, it's a great question. And I think when you started the show, you pointed out a wonderful predicate. These are not considered pets, right? Pets are separate and apart. So that's why, for example, if your association has a limitation on number of pets in a unit, the ESA, emotional support animal, or the service animal would not count as a pet towards that requirement. And the difference is, getting back to your question, an emotional support animal doesn't necessarily have to have any specialized or particularized training, or as a service animal does. The service animal has training to support someone with a disability. The most obvious example to individuals that resonates is someone that is blind. You always see the little vest that says service animal, don't touch me. And you have more protections and more flexibility with respect to public accommodations where you can take the animal. For example, I had a case where a museum was not allowing emotional support animals, but they were allowing service animals. And the distinction is an emotional support animal doesn't necessarily have to be allowed in commercial or public areas. Well, really commercial. There's a distinction between residential and commercial. So the museum could not allow emotional support animals, but did have to allow service animals.
Oh, so that's
So
okay.
yeah, well, right, because they're not doing it in connection with housing. So they're a commercial business. So if you own a commercial business, you can have certain limitations with respect to emotional support animals that you cannot have with respect to
Service.
service animals, right? When you're dealing with associations or any real property for that matter, if you're an individual owner and you're renting, there is effectively, in practical terms, not much of a distinction. The distinction comes into play when it's a commercial property.
Okay. So I know that sometime last year I had called you for a client that had went ahead and applied to an association. He had actually 5 doctor's notes, 5. Like 5 doctors had said he needed an emotional support animal. And when the application came through, the president said to him, "Oh no, you can't have that here." So then he was like, "This is an emotional support. You can't say that." She goes, "Okay, you can have it, but you have to pick it up and carry it across the street to go to the bathroom." So of course, you had said to my client, "Well, if they want to tell you that, let them deny you because because you're not." Or let them approve you, and then let them tell you in writing, send you a note when you walk your dog outside the house, outside the condo, that they'll send you a notification of like a fine or whatever, that you said you would make a lot of money. So this is something that's a big, you said a lot of money. So like to me, so I asked you, right? I said to you, what's a lot of money? And you're like, could be $1 million. So, I think that realtors, you need to be very careful what you say. And it's not even just when you're talking about emotional support. It's talking about somebody calls you to rent a place. Hey, do you take Section 8? You can't say no. You're violating fair housing laws. I redirect them. Hey, fill out an application. Everybody's equal. But I guess...
Yeah, and we have the benefit in our practice of we represent associations as well as individuals. So we see it from both sides. So we see it from the application process when we represent boards. And we always tell them if any of you out there are on boards, if you are dealing with an issue where you feel the need to potentially decline someone as a result of potential fraudulent conduct in connection with registering an emotional support animal or a service animal, don't touch it. It's an invitation for litigation, like you said. So you should always contact an attorney if you're on an association board before you deal with declining someone that's applying for an emotional support animal or a service animal, because as you said, and as I discussed with, I believe your client, I don't know if, at the time, and they open themselves up to a tremendous amount of liability. There's, as you said, the Fair Housing Act, which is a federal law that prevents discrimination in housing based upon not only disabilities but also race and origin and things like that. So it can be problematic for an association, and the case we just talked about, it was pretty egregious. So they can't make someone pick their animal, their emotional support animal, up and walk it to a certain area where it has to poop. Now they do have to clean up after the dog. Just because you have an emotional support animal or a service animal, it's not a get out of jail free card. You still have to respect the rights of the others that you live with, and you can't interfere with what's called their quiet use and enjoyment of the property. But basically, the whole thing is you have to be able to access effectively everything that someone without the dog or I guess you wouldn't have an emotional support ferret, so we'll go with the dog. And so you basically have to be treated the same way.
So when we come back, we're going to go to commercial. But when we come back, I want to talk about what is the fine for somebody to say that it's an emotional support animal and it's really not. So what is the doctor's punishment for that. So as soon as we come back from commercial, we're going to go ahead and see our sponsors, Max Fish from Nationwide Mortgage. Definitely, if you need a mortgage, give Max a call. And also Title Brothers. When you're buying that house and you need title representation with an attorney, give Title Brothers a call. So we'll be right back.
Whether you're buying, selling, refinancing, or building your dream home, you have a lot riding on your loan specialist. Max Fish, a top 1% mortgage loan officer in the nation, will give you a same-day qualifying quote. Max Fish is committed to providing his customers with mortgage services that exceed their expectations. Ensuring that you make the right choice for you and your family is his ultimate goal. Contact Max Fish today at 954-729-6933 or max.fisch@nwmcorp.net.
At Title Brothers LLC, our mission is to give you the best closing experience anywhere in the country. Founded in 2020 by Adam Lohman and Josh Wiseman, here at Title Brothers, we're your one-stop shop for residential real estate, title insurance, title and escrow services, real estate closing, and due diligence services. While primarily located in South Florida, we also host dozens of closings throughout the state and even electronically as requested. To contact the Title Brothers, call us at 954-995-4988 or visit our website and get a quick quote today.
You have been watching Making Money with Laura. For more information, contact Laura Sanders at 954-650-0827 or visit her website at theloracell.com. And now back to the show.
Hi, and welcome back to Making Money with Laura Sanders, and I am your host, Laura Sanders. Right now, we're talking with attorney Rich Lubliner, and he specializes in condo law. He specializes in emotional support animals and what have you, and he is a great resource. So welcome back, Rich. So Rich, tell us a good number to call you if somebody wants to hire you, because I think that a lot of people don't know who to call, who the right kind of lawyer is. They're kind of confused. So I would love for you to give out your information, your website, for those that aren't streaming live with us, so that they can reach out when they have this issue, and hopefully maybe it's a good fit for both of you.
Yeah, thanks. So we have offices in both Boca Raton and West Palm Beach, and our telephone number is 561-207-2018, and the website is www.lub as in boy, liner-law.com. That's rich at lubliner-law.com.
Okay,
and we'd be
great.
happy to answer questions.
Yeah. So, and guys, if you're looking for a realtor to help you find that home with that emotional support animal, you can definitely give me a call at 954-650-0827. And don't forget, we're still helping you do renovations, 0% interest on your home when you're selling. So don't forget to give me a call.
And I can tell you, in working with Laura, she's extraordinarily knowledgeable on the topic, and she knows the right questions to ask.
Or not ask.
Or not ask, yeah. What to say and sometimes what not to say, especially in this area.
So
we're going to talk about in a second.
Talking about that, so number one is if I have a rental and somebody says I have a service animal, we will not charge a pet deposit. Because it's not a pet. It's not a pet.
It's not a pet.
So, and if you're going to charge for the emotional support, you better charge for the children too, right? Because they make just a mess.
It's not a pet.
Yeah. So one of the things when we were conversating is that you were telling me that it is a 3rd-degree felony if a doctor gives out an emotional support letter and it is not emotional support. Now, how would they get busted? We were talking about leaving the dog home.
Well, you mean the doctor? Yeah. So one of the provisions of the Florida law, and one of the purposes was to stop the fraud of, you walk into any doctor's office and they're going to write, yeah, sure, they need an emotional support animal. So in order to dissuade that, a doctor from doing so, the statute provides the penalty that you just said for any doctor that, engages in a fraud in connection with any letter or correspondence that an individual should have an emotional support or a service animal when they shouldn't. So from a theoretical perspective, it sounds wonderful, but the reality is, good luck going into your local law enforcement agency and saying, "Hey, a doctor wrote a note that I think is fake with respect to someone getting an emotional support animal." They're probably not going to do much. So
Right.
it's one of those things. Theoretically, it sounds great, but in practice, I'd be surprised if there was ever a doctor that was
But it's
prosecuted for it.
interesting to know that that is the
Yeah.
case. But if you lost your father, your mother, or a child, like, you know, it makes sense that this could be something like, especially like it's actually a study. I'm a licensed psychotherapist, and there's actually a study that shows that older people with pets live
Live long.
longer. And it's
Yeah.
funny, like most of these 55 plus condos, there's no pets allowed.
Most of them, and I have an association now, and I think you're an expert in this, but I think it's because of the release of oxytocin, right? When we had
Oh yeah, so well, that's
yeah,
also something. It's like, well, they have, you have the feel good releasing of like endorphins, and you could eat chocolate too, and that would happen. But
yeah. Well, that's why I won't stand up, so you don't see how much chocolate I've been eating.
so at least you're feeling
Um,
good. So okay, so we talked about what it would happen if you did write that letter. We talked about that they're not pets and what you
mhm.
shouldn't be asking for. Any cases that you've had that have really like resonated and maybe got somebody $1 million?
Yeah, well, we actually, like I said, sometimes we represent associations in connection with the lawsuits, and sometimes we represent the homeowner, or in this case, was a renter, and they really wanted this renter. It was a building on the water in Palm Beach, and they really wanted this renter out for a multitude of reasons, and they were looking for reasons to get him out. And he had an emotional support animal, and they had their attorney write him a letter asking for documentation in order to approve the emotional support animal, which was already approved. So that's obviously a no-no, unless you have fraudulent reasons to believe that the person obtained it fraudulently. You can't do that, and they didn't have that reason to believe. So he happened to be Caucasian, and his girlfriend was African American. So someone in the association, one of the board members, made a negative racial remark, shall we say. So in addition to the ESA issue, we had that, and we actually filed a lawsuit in federal court under the Fair Housing Act and the Florida state law component, because one of the things you can't do under the Fair Housing Act is retaliate. So because of the fact that we argued that they discriminated based on race, and based upon that, they attempted to retaliate by requesting information that they weren't entitled to with respect to his emotional support animal, which was already approved by the association, and he got seven-figure settlement.
So when you apply to the association and you put down, I have an emotional support animal, do you have to provide the documentation at that time? Can they request it at that time?
They can request it at that time.
So that's where this attorney made the
But again, you
mistake.
really, 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 if you're an association, you need to have a process in place in order to deal with these approvals. Because if you make a mistake, it can be extremely costly. So it's good to have a process in place, and you need to know what questions you can ask, and as you said rather before, what questions you can't ask, because that's what gets you in trouble. People think that they can, ask, "Whoa, why do you need the dog? What condition you have?" You're
Mm-mm.
dead right on that.
So what other
So
kind of things, like I know you talked about the dogs don't have to be on a leash. I also read that a
well,
horse.
yes
Wait,
and no.
I read a horse is an emotional support animal.
It can be, yeah,
Miniature
yeah.
horse, but a horse.
So the dog, a service animal, doesn't have to be on a leash, but it does. The owner does have to control it.
Okay.
So, for example, obviously, if you have any issues with the use of your arms, you may not be able to leash the dog, but you have to have a certain command or something that keeps the dog under control. Because again, it doesn't give you free reign to terrorize the rest of your community. You still have to respect the quiet use and enjoyment and the rights of other individuals to enjoy their property, and you can't infringe on that if you have a disability. The goal here is to make sure everyone's treated equally.
Can you bring
What
a
do they
horse
have?
into a condo? I'm just asking. I mean,
I never had a case with an emotional support horse, but I highly doubt it because you have a health and safety argument.
okay, okay.
So, but we can try.
Okay, and then we talked about people that say the dog's an emotional support and then they leave it home and go
Yeah,
off
yeah.
somewhere.
So I'm dealing with that case. Actually, you said a 55 and over community. I'm dealing with that case. Another actual condominium that happens to be in Palm Beach, and so they're a 55 and over community, and they don't allow dogs, and they're dealing with that issue now in the approval process.
You represent the association or the
I represent the
tenant?
association in this instance.
In this
Correct.
case, okay. So do you
Yeah.
feel like you're on the winning side since they've left the dog home alone?
We will be. We haven't initiated the process yet, but in this case, the individual goes to live in New York for several weeks and leaves the dog with his wife. So obviously, if it's an emotional support animal that's necessary to help you get through the day, if you take it, excuse me, if you don't take it when you leave for 3 weeks, you know, that gives the association the ability to take certain action and make certain arguments and ask additional questions. I had another case where a woman who happened to be a property manager, she argued that her 7 and 8 year old Rottweilers were emotional support animals. But the association didn't want to touch it, didn't want to argue against it, and I understand why, because as we discussed, the potential exposure, and they allowed the non-pets, not horses, but non-pets, to stay in the unit because they didn't want to fight. So yeah, it's contentious. It's hotly contested. It's an area where there's rampant fraud, and I think the intention behind the statute was good, but the practical effect is not much at all.
Right. And since we're here, and I mean, we could talk about this, I'm sure, a lot, but we're only have a few more minutes left. It goes so fast. Is there
Yeah, it does.
what are some other specialties that you do in law that would be a good referral for you?
Oh, thanks. So effectively, the way I tell everyone is we have
Condo
a varied.
associations.
I'm sorry?
Condo associations would definitely be.
Condo associations, HOA
Yeah.
association. We actually represent a co-op, which is very rare in Florida. I'm from New York, and they're pretty much all
Everything's
over.
a co-op.
Yeah, everything's a co-op. Here,
I
everything's
do
an
have a
association.
question about co-ops, and I don't
Okay.
know if you know the answer to this, and I know a lot of realtors are very curious about this, and this will probably be the last thing, and we'll have to be quick, but we've never seen co-ops come to their 100-year lease at this point in time in our lifetime yet. What
Yep.
will happen when it gets to the 100? And I have this question asked of me all the time. And unfortunately, since I'm not 100 years old, and a lot of these condos were in the 1960s, so they're more than 50% through their 100-year lease. And if somebody decides that this person that owns this co-op right next door to this other co-op, right, and they both decide to sell at the same time and they knock it down, what do you get? You get nothing?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Nothing. Now, there are arguments. The association, interestingly enough, that I was telling you about with the 55 and over community, they are a co-op. And one of the things that I'm representing them in now is Connection. They're about, I think, 60% through the 99-year lease, and they're trying to negotiate. And in this case, different entities own different buildings, so it's somewhat complex. But they're trying to negotiate. There are certain outs you can have based upon unconscionability arguments, but you don't have an ownership interest. You have a possessory interest,
Right.
just like the renter.
So would
just
you
like
say
I-
buyer beware with a co-op?
Buyer beware. Yeah, I mean, there are things that could occur outside of your control that could certainly impact the value. Obviously, you can't. Your condo's not going to be worth much if the lease is about to be up in 3 years.
Right.
So,
Well, we have about 30 seconds left. So really quickly, any other kind of law that you specialize in?
Yeah,
Give us your
well,
number again.
we do everything essentially the way I describe it is we don't do family law, we don't do personal injury, and we don't do criminal. We pretty much do everything else. We have a wide, varied commercial litigation practice. We also have developed a niche practice in equine law, given our proximity to Wellington. And we also do all types of corporate work, like forming businesses, restructuring businesses, drafting employment agreements, and things like that. And again, the phone number is 561-207-2018, and the website is www.liner-law.com.
Thank you, Richard. You have been great. You're awesome. And guys, if you really need to talk to somebody, give Rich a call. He's great. He's a plethora of information, and I highly recommend him. Again, my name's Laura Sanders. I'm your host, Making Money with Laura. You can get me at 954-650-0827 at laurasells.com. Thanks, and have a great night, guys.
Thank you for
The
tuning
opinions
in for
expressed on the
Making Money
proceed-
with Laura Sanders, a name you can trust. To join the conversation, call us at the studio, 888-994-4995 Studio A, or contact Laura directly at 954-650-0827. Laura Sanders, a name you can trust. We look forward to seeing you next week.